My name is Peter Dickinson, and I'm the director of Simon Fraser University's Institute for Performance Studies. I'm also a professor here in the School of Contemporary Arts. So I would first of all like to acknowledge that today's event takes place on the unceded indigenous territories of the Coast Salish peoples, including lands belonging to the Squamish, Musqueam, and Tsleil-Waututh First Nations. This acknowledgement, which settler citizens like myself have learned to incorporate in opening remarks at events such as these, does not begin to redress the historical violence of continued colonial occupation of these lands. However, as a performance studies scholar who believes that speech acts do things, that language is always consequential, I feel that the repetition of this acknowledgement and the complicated feelings it may incite among different individuals in the audience is performing important cultural work, if only in momentarily unsettling, taken for granted assumptions about our sense of place. So Critical Ideas is a partnership between the PuSh Festival and the Institute for Performance Studies that brings together artists, critics, scholars, and audiences to discuss formal, social, and ideological issues affecting performance practice and reception today. This is our fourth year collaborating on this exchange, for which we also receive crucial support from SFU Woodward's cultural programs and the Faculty Communications, Art, and Technology. So before I introduce today's featured topic and speakers, I would like to remind you that there are two more panels taking place over the course of the festival. Next Friday, January 25th, at the same time, same place here in the World Arts Center, we will be focusing on arts and access, asking the critical question of how focusing more deeply and meaningfully on accessibility changes our approach to the creation, curation, and experience of art. To answer this question, we have invited deaf artists and practitioners and their allies to share with us their stories regarding successes and failures and challenges in building a more inclusive and intersectional performance ecology. These folks include Dawn Janie Brearley and Ravi Jain, who are part of the Why Not theater production Prince Hamlet, Denise Reeds, who's from ASLSQ Entertainment, and Jan Dobrisher, theater artist, producer, and inclusive designer. The following Friday, February 1st, but this time in the morning, 10:30, and taking place in the cinema on the third floor of this building, our final Critical Ideas panel will focus on ethics and consent, asking how in creator-producer, peer-to-peer, and artist-audience relationships we can foster practices of ethical consent and care in performance and curation, while also acknowledging the power structures that govern such relationships. Contributing to this conversation will be Lakulik Williamson Bathory and Evelyn Perry, creator-performers of Kinalik, These Sharp Tools, Lee Sufei, artistic director of Battery Opera Performance, and Victoria Hunt, choreographer and performer of Copper Promises, Hinami Haka. And our guest moderator for this panel will be Renelta Arluk, Director of Indigenous Arts at the BAM Center. Now to today's panel, which addresses a suite of performances in this year's PuSh Festival that showcase contemporary Japanese sound art. I refer to Tetsuya Umeda's Ringo, which takes place this evening at 7 p.m. at Performance Works, ASUNA's 100 Keyboards, which has two performances tomorrow at 4 and 8 p.m. at the Russian Hall, and Marginal Consort, a performance by the eponymous orchestra led by Kazuo Imai that is being held on Sunday at 2 p.m. at Performance Works. To help us navigate how sound intersects with space, what's happening right now in this room, and how sound scores space in each of these artists' work, and to contextualize that work within the larger history of world sound art and theories of listening, we have invited Japanese-born and New York-based artist, composer, and curator Aki Onda to address our audience today. Known for his cassette memories, sound diary field recordings collected on a Walkman cassette player over the past 3 decades, Aki creates compositions, performances, and visual artworks based on this sound archive. For more than 15 years, he has also collaborated with a range of acclaimed visual artists, musicians, filmmakers, and choreographers. His work has been presented at the Kitchen, MoMA, Red Cat, the Time-Based Art Festival, Documenta, the Louvre Museum, and the list goes on and on. Aki's going to begin today by having a conversation. We're lucky enough to have two of our featured artists with us today. And so he's going to start with a short conversation with Kazuo Imai, who also, I should mention, has work for sale at the back of the room. Then he's going to give us a little illustrated lecture, and we're going to then conclude by having a general conversation, which will also include ASUNA, who's here with us today in the audience. We're going to keep it kind of free, casual. Aki will guide us through everything, and we'll have time for general conversation. Please welcome Aki and Kazuo to the stage.
I'm just waiting for the visual changes. Oh, yeah. Thank you, Peter, for introducing us. My name is Aki Onda, as you heard. And today, anyway, I'm going to start with a conversation with a member of Marginal Consort. So you're now looking at the picture of their performance. So let me kind of explain you quickly about what they do. Marginal Consort is a Japanese collective improvisation group founded by members of East Bionic Symphonia. Actually, there was an artist called Takehisa Kosugi. He was involved in Fluxus movement and sort of pioneer of Japanese sound art scene. So all members, now there are 4 members, it used to be 5, but all of them studied with them, Takehisa Kosugi. He was actually music director of Mars Cunningham dance company from 1996. He started working with the company back in the 70s, but actually he became a music director in 1996. Ooh, I hear some feedback here. And so, Marginal Consort, it's a sort of kind of music group, but what they do is quite unusual. And so they're going to do performance on Sunday, right? Yeah. And anyway, so they have background of music and also visual art. Each member has a different background. And as I said, they studied with Takehisa Kosugi in a kind of an art school. Was it 70s, 60s? 75. So, they have got a long career. And Marginal Consort. Okay, I'll show you some pictures. So you might get a sort of, idea. So, this is their performance documentation photo. And looks like, it's an open stage. Not in the, conventional music venue, which is separated by stage and the audience area. So they always use this kind of open space and place themselves, 4 members, sometimes in each corner, sometimes anyway. There's some kind of distance. And the audience can be anywhere in the space. So this is sort of, photos of the documentation which I saw in New York last year. They were using the venue called Pioneer Works, which is actually a pretty big place. And each member. So, in a sense, they are performing among audience. So it looks like, they have lots of objects, kind of handmade instrument. And some of instrument, look like this bamboo, tied with some kind of strings. It was also placed on the stage, not stage, on the floor, not on the table. And this picture is actually, they're showing Berlin. So they use pretty big space, and there's a sort of distance between among sort of members. And Marginal Consort discuss nothing before their performance. So they don't know what to, they don't plan what they do. And so it's basically 4 independent solo during the performance. And it also can be durational, 2 to 4 hours. Most of the cases, 3 hours. How long the show in, okay, looks like Sunday, they are going to play 3 hours. So it's quite long. So 3 hours, they play independently. But of course, there's a time base. So, but they make context, each context themselves. And yet together, they sort of, they make sort of the whole composition, including some sort of visual element. Because as you see, it's quite visual. It's not just like, concert on a stage. And lots of kind of elements you see. It has a kind of visual aspect. So then anyway, let's talk with Kazuo-san. And here's Kazuo Imai. And Keiko, who translated our conversation. Yeah. So anyway, how did you come up with this kind of idea?
Sorry, I'm talking to Japanese.
日本語大丈夫ですよ。
コレクティブのインプロビゼーションにはずっと興味は持っていて、
I've been having an interest on doing some collective improvisation.
ただ僕はさっき恩田さんが話されたような70年代に、日本のそういうコレクティブのインプロビゼーションのグループで演奏した経験があります。
But as what Mr. Onda has mentioned before, that he has been involved back in the 70s doing collective improvisation.
それはさっきの竹久小杉が作ったタージマハルトラベラーズというグループとその生徒たちで作ったイーストバイオニックシンフォニアというグループにも参加しました。
It was when, as it was mentioned too, that the person named Takehisa Kosugi, when he was a student there, he had performed in Takehisa Kosugi's group named Taj Mahal Travelers, and also so he played a few times in a group, and also when he was a student of Mr. Kosugi's, they had a group called East Bionic Symphonia. So that's the time that he was doing a collective improvisation.
それと当時そういう世界的にいろいろな集団即興のグループが生まれていて、例えばイギリスの AMM とかムジカエレクトロニカビバとかそういういわゆるフリージャズとかそういうインプロビゼーションとは違うアプローチのグループが生まれてを聞いたりしていました。
And around the same time period, there were like many other collective improvisation groups in a different areas in the world, like AMM from England, or like Musical Electronic Viva, that's an Italian group, which were quite different from like the free jazz and those kind of music.
ただその当時は興味を持っていたそういう集団即興のあり方ですが、ちょっとそれに不満もありました。
And so he wanted to do the collective improvisation, but he had a different. He was not really like fulfilled with the what he'd seen from those groups. So maybe he wanted to do something different.
それはある程度みんなある方向性を持っていて、例えばドローンのような持続的な音の上にみんな集まってくるような方法が多くなってきました。
For example, he was noticing that those groups have a certain direction of a musical direction, like say if you look at drum music, then that's like you put the sound or melodies on top of the same scales or tone.
それで、そういうものではない集団の作り方はないかと考えていました。
So I've been seeking some of the ways that he could find some like completely different from that kind of having that kind of aspect.
それで、その集団をいかにそのメンバーと個人として、明確にパフォーマンスさせて、なおかつ集団が作れないかと考えました。
So he was trying to make up a group, a collective improvisational group, having soloists doing working in a group, so to speak, like doing individual solo performances within a context of group improvisation.
それでちょうどイーストバイオニックシンフォニアが終わって20年ぐらい経った頃に、まあ20年も経つばそれぞれの個性が明確になっていると思えたので、その頃にグループを作ることを考えました。
So after like 20 years since the East Bionic Symphonia has ended or finished, so to speak, he figured that maybe the each person's characteristics, so to speak, may be more present, more there, so it could be interesting to work around.
それってやっぱりそれぞれが個別にソロのようにすることがそれぞれの個性を明確に出せると思ったので、それが出せる方法として、離れて演奏するということを考えました。
Then he came up with the idea of placing each person separately in a distance to bring out more of to bring out and clarify the individualism, like individual color of each performer.
どうしても隣で演奏すると影響されて、それぞれ自分勝手にやっていても同じような 形になっていくことが多いので、離れることを選びました。
When each other kind of like places themselves close to each other, then they happen to start affecting each other, and to avoid that, he thought it's better to place them separately.
Yeah, by the way, he has two different backgrounds. He also studied with actually a guitarist called Masayuki Takayanagi. He's a kind of free jazz guitarist, more like a musician. So then he also studied with Takehisa Kosugi, almost like almost like a conceptual artist. So he has kind of two different, actually, directions when he was young. So in a sense, he kind of combined both of them because in the Marginal Consort, he has a kind of clear concept, like how to specialize, specialization of the sound, or there's a kind of structure. But it's not really like a musical structure. So he kind of bringing a different idea to music.
まあ当然そういうことはあります。
So why you play longer hours, like duration of performance? What's the reason behind?
まあなんだ、演奏時間が短いとどうしてもある、まあ一つのアイデアでできてしまったり、あとは
When the performance is short, then you can do things with just having one idea.
あとは知らぬ間に構成したり
Or start composing without realizing or knowing it.
してしまうんですが、長いとおしまいまでなかなか考えられない。
But when it comes to having a long performance, then you never know what's gonna happen or what. You never know till the very end.
Yeah, this means in a sense they can count on pre-existing structure or compositional approach. So in a sense, they really also kind of distance between musicians. I think it helps. He said if it's next to each other, in a sense they tend to play together. However, it's kind of, if you see the picture, so each member, there's a distance between members. So in a sense, it's kind of far enough to do their own things.
まあそう、まあだからそういう別々のスペースにあって同時に進行するという、ことはあるし、あと遠いので実際何をやってるか他の人が何をやってるかよくわからないでやります。
So yeah, as it's been said that they do the members in the group do individually the individual performance or show during the performance, but at the same time, like they are far in apart in distance that they cannot even actually see each other.
まあだからそういう環境を作るっているのは例えばジョン・ケージが森の中の音は風が吹いて葉っぱが揺れるとかいろいろありますが、僕らはその森の中にいる動物が勝手にみんな動いて音がすると。でそれぞれは好きに生きているがそこでいろいろ聞こえるのは同時に起きてくる音だというような 形ですね。
So that's something like, for example, let's say John Cage describing like within the forest or in the woods, you can hear or the leaves, the sound of the leaves or like the branches or twigs and like sounds like that. But for Marginal Consort, it's something like animals in the woods, like living and moving and walking or doing whatever they want to, like however they want to in the woods. But at the same time, they are sharing the time together. They are there.
And you mentioned actually John Cage, but also I know you've seen Mars Cunningham's performance in 1976. Actually, they performed in Tokyo at that time. So, Mars Cunningham also, he's a choreographer, and he incorporated some sort of visual or sound. However, the way Mars Cunningham worked with composer and a visual artist, actually, those different elements were not synchronizing. So coexisting. So that's kind of an interesting way of working. But is there any kind of influence, or what do you think? How did you felt when you saw Mars Cunningham's performance?
その76年にマースとケイジが日本に来た時に僕はリハーサルからケイジのそばで見ていました。
Yeah, when Mars Cunningham and John Cage came to Japan in the year of 76, I was watching them from the rehearsal.
それでケイジの音の作り方に非常に驚いたんですが、
I was very surprised or impressed by the approach or how John Cage was approaching the sound.
本番でマース・カニンハムと一緒にやった作品が素晴らしく感じました。
And I was quite impressed by the work when Mars Cunningham, John Cage sound came together with Mars Cunningham's work on stage.
それは音楽はジョン・ケージのカートリッジ・ミュージックという曲を演奏して、マースのカンパニーが踊ったという作品でした。
So it was the work of Mars Cunningham's group danced with John Cage's work named Cartridge Music.
それでカートリッジミュージックというのは、テーブルの上に物が例えばコップを動かすと音がする、アンプリファイした音が鳴るんですが、そういう音と踊りが同時に進行している内容が素晴らしかったんです。
So the cartridge music of John Cage is something like if you move a glass on a table, then the sound is amplified. So the sound of that kind of things and the music, or the sound and the dance were parallel. It was kind of played together, and he was very much surprised how it worked.
それでその同時に違うものがあるということの美しさとかいうようなものに非常に興味を持ちました。
And he was very much intrigued by the beauty of how the different things can coexist together.
まあそういう記憶がマージナルコンソートを考える上で影響があったとは思います。
So that kind of memory or what he remembers must have influenced a lot of the realization or like making up this group called Marginal Consort.
So, and this means in a sense 4 parallel competition, or 4 parallel in a sense in a play in the same space. So, and actually audience can move around freely. So, if they get closer to one musician, they can hear, it's also, our ears can focus on one sound, or sometimes multiple sounds. It's really connected to our consciousness. But we can filter out the other sound too. In a sense, actually, each audience member is also basically can hear different sonic balance within the performance. And they can, in a sense, compose the flow themselves as well. So, what do you think about the sort of the role of the audience in the performance?
そうオーディエンスの役割というよりはその場所によって聞こえる音が変わるのでオーディエンスが自分で音を探すということはできます。
The audience, each person can seek the sound because, like as he said, like the sound has been, like depending upon the where you stand or sit or where you decide to place yourselves, like you hear differently. So and you can choose the sound which you want to hear.
だからどの音が正しい音かはないです。
So there's nothing like which sound is correct or good.
それに僕らは音楽というよりもただ音を出すことをしているだけなので。
And we rather like project sound, a sound or sounds rather than playing music.
なので、オーディエンスが音を見つけていいなと感じる時があればその人の中に音楽が聞こえたということになります。
So when a listener or the people in the audience they seek the sound, and if it happens to be the sound that you like, then that's when the person has found a music, so to speak.
だからそれは3時間やっている中の5分間だけいいなと思える時があったかもしれないし、あとはオーディエンス一人一人全部違うところがいいと思うということもあると思います。
So maybe like it can happen like a person may like only 5 minutes out of 3 hours performance. Or of course each person may like different parts of 3 hours performance.
そういうことが面白い。
It's like he mentioned about the kind of metaphor of woods of John Cage, but in a sense, you can, go into the woods and look for something interesting, and in a sense, then wandering around, and so in a sense, each audience can really create their own sort of structure as well. Yeah, which makes this kind of experience really unique. So he kind of respect individual. I say individuality or individual what? That's a good word. But in a sense, each member independent, but the audience is kind of independent too. So that's also kind of different from conventional concert, which actually, in a sense, if it's separated on stage, it's also something like this. We are kind of giver and the taker. So that's kind of interesting, clear line, which we don't see, but it's actually really controls our mind. But if the situation is, it's something like this, and you have to have a different kind of mind for dealing with the situation. That makes, I think, makes this kind of experience more interesting. And actually, is there any kind of question to him, if you have?
When you present this kind of performance, are you, before any performance or happening, are you talking to the people and tell them what it's about or what they can expect or not, or just let them figure it out?
Ah, それは説明しません。それぞれの方に発見してもらいたいです。
Yes, even actually, even the members, 4 members, they don't talk. Actually, it's kind of interesting. They started in 1996, right? Yeah. And for some years, the first time they really discussed about what they do, he mentioned it was in Berlin in 2000, just a few years ago. 2 years ago. So, not 20 years, but more than 15 years. They didn't discuss anything. In a sense, Kazuo Imai, he set the rules. But, they asked, other members to follow the ideas. But other members, in a sense, have probably different kind of ideas or different kind of... Anyway, they've been performing together. And it's interesting. They've been performing once in a year, only once. So usually they don't, hang out or they don't meet. But just meet once in a year and perform, which is also quite unusual. But just last several years, they've been getting so many offers from abroad. They're getting more popular. Like superstar. so that's why they perform a lot these days. But before that, no, just once in a year.
I'm curious to know if any of the audience members then take part in the performance. Do they make sounds along with the musicians, or do they draw, or maybe do other creative activities?
Yeah, それ、
Could you say once more, please?
Yeah, sorry, I'll say it again into the microphone. I'm curious to know if any of the audience members take part in the performances. It sounds like they don't receive any instructions in advance, but maybe they take part in the performances by maybe making sounds alongside the musicians, or maybe drawing or painting or doing other creative activities in that performative space. Has any of that been documented? Do you have any thoughts on that? Thank you.
Yeah. 特にそれは考えていません。で、っていうかそういうことは。
That is not really a part of the intention, or I don't know how to say it, but it's not something that I have planned on before.
それ まあそうね、オーディエンスには動いてもらう。ただ、
It's nice to have the audience move around the space, but
そういうことを始める人はいなかった今の。
but up to now, there haven't been anybody who joined us like that. Like,
ただそういう楽しい音じゃなくて、暴れる人がいたりするのでパフォーマンスで。
So like what we create is not maybe it's nothing amusing, but there are some people like in a group who go quite wild, physically or sound-wise.
Yeah, there's a movement of body, you know. Those kind of the performance for musicians, performers. Yeah, they also move around too. So.
So I'm just curious because I've never been to or see his show, like their shows. So I'm just curious if you mentioned that it never rehearsed or you never planned beforwards. So do the musicians have a similar style? So when the audience moving around the room, do they feel like all the music are coherent to each other, or it's very different? Just very curious to know.
Musicians are coherent or music?
Music.
音楽がつながりがあるかっていうなんか連携性みたいなのがあるかっていう。
それはないです。
No.
Yeah, just coexist, within the space.
そう、それはそこで同時にやっているということで
Yeah,
す。
exactly what Aki said.
Thank you. It's just I'm trying to imagine the scene, and it's very cool. I will say I would love to see it. Thank you.
Okay, so let's move on. Yeah. So now I'm going to talk more about sound and space. So yeah, thank you so much for Kazuo and Keiko. So I'd like to talk about relationship between sound and space, or sound as a space. It is basically rooted in my practice as an artist deeply, and I am interested in exploring the possibility. As I also work as a curator, I always try to follow what's happening around. I see I'd like to know what other artists are doing. And especially last several years, I noticed many artists from different generations create their work along with the subject, sound and space, or incorporate it as an element into their work. Some artists directly address the subject, others sort of indirect. I would even say it is getting a sort of trend or fashion, not just in the music field, but also visual art and performing arts field. And it actually quite often happens somewhere between the field. Can be sort of interdisciplinary or cross-disciplinary fields. If it's going to be like a mainstream music, mainstream dance, it doesn't happen so often actually. And however, it is something not new. Sound and space has been studied and explored by numbers of composers and sound artists, at least for the last half century, in the context of experimental music or avant-garde art or sound art. So, not just discussing, this time PuSh Festival present 2 Japanese artists and 1 group, which is Marginal Consort. So, not just about discussing about their practices. I'd like to talk about other artists, practice of other artists too. And also this talk is not designed for explaining what 2 artists and 1 group do. I'd rather want to use this opportunity to let you know there's a kind of the infinite number of possibilities with the subject. Yeah, the artists, they deal with oral and visual phenomena or phenomenon within the 3-dimensional space they are given. And unless you are physically in the space and experience, so many things are hard to tell. And also, all performances, 3 performances in the PuSh Festival consist of several different elements, such as compositional or improvisational sounds, visually arranged setup, movements of body, etc. So operating as, those are operating as a whole composition. So it's not just about the sound. There's really strong complexity. And some of them has hard to define, sort of mysterious elements. So whatever I say, okay, maybe I could say something philosophical or something highly intellectual, which I doubt. Whatever I say, in a sense, it won't beat your real experience at the performance. Those are quite different. So I don't really try to theorize what they do, actually. And also, however, I've seen their performances actually a number of times over the years, and I can tell excellence. And ASUNA, who is one of the performers, are here. So I'll ask you some questions later, and also I'm going to talk a little about work of Tetsuya Umeda, who is going to perform actually later today, right? Yeah. Anyway, I like to start from very basic or some sort of logic and explain you what is behind. So now you see, I quoted these lines from the text written by composer Alvin Lucier. Since the mid-60s, Lucier has produced a range of important compositions by concerning the sound as physical phenomena. Yeah, one kind of famous compositions, I'm sitting in the room. So he written text, quite simple one, starting from I'm sitting in the room, like this, he reads like this. And he recorded his talk once, then played the recording again in the same space. And he repeated this numerous times, over and over. So then the recording itself started capturing characteristic of the space, acoustic characteristic, and the form and the frequencies. Each space has specific kind of frequency, and recording started emphasizing characteristic and specific frequency. So, basically sound has specific spatial characteristics. And short wavelengths, and also high frequency travels inside the space in a different way. And sound wave flow away from the sound source. If you make this kind of sound, it doesn't go one direction. It's go actually 360 degrees, just spreads out. And each space has its own personality that modify position and move sounds by means of absorption, reflections, attenuations, and other structurally related phenomena. So we actually don't hear the sound as it is, never. Unless if you're in a kind of anechoic chamber, which mute all kind of reverberations. So we don't hear actually original sound as it is, in our life. So then, if we think about the context of performance, like music, or dance, or theater, whatever. So in the Western culture, so we've been actually presenting sort of some kind of a system for presenting works. There's conventional concert. Okay, let's talk about the music station. In the Western context, actually, there's a conventional concert format, which stage and seating area are separated. And we often use this kind of sound system. If it's classical concert, they tend to use the kind of acoustic of the space. But if it's other, if you speak like this, sound travels unidirection or one direction. Tend to, of course, there's some kind of complexity. But if you look at the ceiling, there's a kind of boards, which actually mute the reflections. And also that kind of material also mute the sound. So there we're using, mostly sound from speakers. So it really travels in one direction. But 3 performances you see in PuSh Festival this time, they all use open space. So that really changes sort of what they do as well. As I said, actually, sound travels, kind of spreads out, not just one direction, in any direction. So if there's a sound source, and it just spreads out in the space. And the audience member can be anywhere. Actually, it's also the same for 3 performances this time. Audience member can move around. I think Ringo, which is actually Tetsuya Umeda's performance, it's the same too, right? They can move around. So this also gives some kind of independence to the audience. Because, if it's kind of, conventional stage, viewpoint is also fixed. I'm talking about visual aspect. But if it's kind of open space, audience can choose their own viewpoint and they can move around. So that's also one of the characteristics of this kind of performance. So this kind of using space, it's really changed dynamics. And that's why the composer Alvin Lucier thought about this kind of space for performance. That's in the 70s. So there's, I often dreamed of performance spaces specifically designed for works based on the 3-dimensional characteristic of sound. So it's kind of interesting. Sound has its own character. However, the way to present sound has been not really following the basic of the sound. So in a sense, the concert situation, conventional concert situation is not the only way to present the sound. And it's also really kind of changes sort of dynamics of the sound. So I'm playing, sound here. If I move here, essentially, it also changes sort of dynamics of the relationship between the performer and the performer. This performer, kind of, just an example. Relationship between the performer and audience as well. So, it's really changing the sort of the sense of space and how perception, or your perception of the space itself, and actually acoustics, and also dynamics between the performer and the audience. So, yeah, there's sort of really kind of wide range of kind of possibilities. Not just following the conventional style. And as I said, this is even many not many, but some composers, even in the 60s, were thinking about this kind of thing, like Max Neuhaus, kind of sound artist. He was actually more like a conventional classical percussion player. However, at some point, he was kind of really frustrated. The conventional situation is controlling, almost like controlling his notion of making music. So he conceived a project called Listen. That's 1996. Why limit the listening to the concert hall instead of bringing those sounds into the hall? Why not simply take the audience outside? So what he did, that's kind of his text. I'll read it. Actually, it's just one paragraph. But, I ask audience to meet me on the corner of Avenue D, that's in New York, and West 14th Street in Manhattan. I rubber stamp, listen. It's a kind of just listen. The word listen on each person's hand. His rubber stamp. And they began walking with them down 14th Street towards the East River. At that point of the street bisect, there's a major power plant. There's actually a big power plant on the 14th Street. As I had noticed previously, one can hear some spectacularly massive rumbling of the power plant. We continued, crossing the highway and walking alongside the sound of its tire wash down the river for the few blocks, recrossing over the pedestrian bridge, passing through a Puerto Rican street, like of the Lower East Side to my studio, where I performed some percussion pieces for them. So this performance started sort of sound walk, and eventually he took the audience to his studio and played percussion. So that's 1996. So this kind of experiment has been there, for a long time. And there's a sort of lineage of artists. And I would say, some artists, Kazuo, he's 60 something, if you don't mind, reveal. And ASUNA, and also, and Tetsuya, they are much younger, so they're really from different generations. But so there's kind of lineage, and there's some kind of influence from older generation too. And this one is actually my performance. So I've been using cassette Walkman to collect field recordings, environmental sound. It started actually 1988, so 30 years I've been collecting sound, and I have thousands of cassettes. And when it's actually I consider as a sound diary, a sort of my memory of sounds. So I realized I like playing those sound memories at a place where it has its own memories. And so that, my memory and the memory of the place sound each other, resonate each other, and create some kind of interesting phenomena. So I deal with acoustics of the space, acoustics, and also history, and sort of psyche or energy of the space. So that kind of dealing with, it's kind of strange ritual to evoke the memories of the place. So this one is actually, I did it at the Louvre Museum. Louvre Museum has two big squares, one with pyramid and one with fountain. And this place called Cour Carré of the Louvre, that's kind of one of my favorite places in Paris. And it's kind of unusual to see such a wide open space in the crowded central area of the Paris. And also the acoustics are really special there. I'm not sure if Square is designed for the specific acoustics, probably not. But the space transmits the sound easily and spread it vastly. Spreads it. Like, for example, one violin player was playing at one corner. Actually, it kind of sound travels all over the space. And especially kind of in the evening, when all the noises of the city calm down. So especially, you hear sound travels much more. If there's a kind of someone is walking, you can really hear the footsteps. And there's a water fountains, which goes on as a noise, interesting noise. And this is also another performance which I did actually last year in Poland. It used to be a kind of sanatorium. It's a glass house of the sanatorium, and it's surrounded by the glass, so it has really interesting acoustics. So I tend to use really simple instrument, usually this kind of cassette Walkman, you can see the instrument, but I just use cassette Walkman and one small amp, and that's it. But I can really play with, kind of acoustics of the space itself. And this is actually, there's an artist called Aki Suzuki, Japanese sound artist, Aki Suzuki, who's been active since 60s. And he created really interesting instrument. Let's hear it. So he's playing some kind of really strange instrument, and he calls this instrument analapos. And this is similar to the construction of the instrument is similar to the toy telephones. You might play with it when you're a child, and with two cups attached by a string. But instead, he used two metal cylinders connected by a spring coil. So this instrument creates echo of the original sound because at the first you hear lots of echoes. However, when he just played flute, original sound was really different. And echo is almost like sort of if you imagine the big cathedral in a big church, and same kind of effect he can make it, same kind of effect just by using this simple instrument. And especially we were playing, I was playing, we were playing together on top of the hill in LA. So it's outside, so there's almost no echo. You still hear lots of echoes. So it's almost like cathedral-like echo machine. So this is a microcosm inside this instrument. I like to also talk about it actually. Now, in the last 2 years, there's a kind of Filipino composer called Jose Maceda, which I've been researching. He's a composer who was really interesting. Actually, he had a piano training in Paris before World War II, and studied with a famous piano teacher called Alfred Cortot. But at some point, he was interested in Filipino indigenous music, traditional music, and started sort of researching himself as a musicologist. Then after that, nearly he became 50, he started actually composing himself. So he has two backgrounds, Western avant-garde music and indigenous Filipino music. And he was the one who was really into the relationship between the space, sound and space. Because if you think about this kind of indigenous music or traditional music, it has been played by people, village people, as a ceremonial ritual for thousands of years. So there was always kind of special aspect. It's so different from Western context of the music. So music was a part of their life. So Jose Maceda, he wanted to recreate that kind of situation in his composition. So this composition, actually, he used a round-shaped church and placed 241 musicians among the audience. So it's kind of closer to the situation of Marginal Consort. So each actually listeners can listen to different sound in this kind of situation. And another composition called Ugnayan. So now you're hearing the sound a little bit. He wanted to compose all Manila people can listen to. So he used 37 radio stations, and actually this was a 20-track composition, 51 minutes. So he broadcasted each track from different radio stations, and he asked people to gather a meeting spot, 142 meeting spot in the city, to bring transistor radio in their hand. So each actually listeners were tuned in for each radio station. And music, it is said 2 to 10 million people listen to the sound. So the scale was unprecedented. And space doesn't have to be this kind of space, architectural space. In a sense that if you think about the concept of space, it can be much larger, like a city itself. And by using technology, it is possible to spread the sound or transmit the sound and cover the whole city as well. But this was actually broadcasted 1974. But if you imagine, actually he held all radio stations in Manila, so only if you tune on the radio, people hear only this sound, which is quite interesting situation because it's a kind of avant-garde composition. But and this is actually another composition he made, for called Udo Udoro. This is a composition for some hundreds to some thousand people. He mainly used sort of simple bamboo instrument like tubes, which anybody can play, and it's score is almost like an instruction. So people get together at the public space and play this kind of piece. So this is also another kind of space. Sound is kind of intrusive. I mean, it can exist in any kind of space. And in a sense, there's sort of composer or artists, they can take so many different approaches within the idea of the sound of space. And this is a Japanese group called Taj Mahal Travelers, which actually Kazuo mentioned in his talk, which is actually led by composer Takehisa Kosugi. And back in the 72, the group was sort of really kind of based on improvisational approach. And what is interesting is they incorporated sense of travel into the sort of idea of the music. So that's why, in a sense, Taj Mahal Travelers. So they were traveling in Europe, 1972, and it's a documentation of the performance, or documentation of a sort of a tour. So they travel from Europe to Taj Mahal in India, and along the way, they did so many performances. So it's kind of possible to incorporate the idea of traveling and to take it as a space as well. So in a sense, I just want to say, in a sense, this kind of space and sound, it doesn't really have to be as a kind of fixed architectural space. You can really kind of actually extend the idea. And still, but just going back to the space as an architectural space. And this is actually one of the artists, ASUNA's performance setup. So he uses more than 100 toy keyboards and place them on the floor of the space. And during the performance, which is usually 80 to 90 minutes, he started playing keyboard one by one. Of course, he doesn't have 100 hands. So he used kind of wooden stick, and he put it in between keys of the keyboard. And he can stick into it, and that holds the key. So in that case, he can play a large number of keyboards by himself. And the system is really clear. This is a kind of basic idea. I said I don't want to talk too much about the performance, but this is actually okay to, probably it's better to explain what is behind the performance. And as you see, 100 keyboards played at once create really interesting phenomena. One is those keyboards are cheaply made, and it's not exactly the same tuning. So pitch is slightly different, and then if he plays them at once, it's all detuned, and each sound of the keyboard interfere each other and create really interesting kind of phenomena. And it's kind of subtle, but if you hear it, and the same as other performance, if you move around in this kind of move around in space, you hear so many different interferences happening in the same space. And so I'd like to ask you some questions to artist, him, ASUNA. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So, どうして、why actually you started this kind of performance? It's a very simple question. How come? How did you get the idea?
10代の頃に、学生の頃にもともとはコンピューターで音楽を作ってた。でそのコンピューターで音楽を作れるようになった時に、その音のその波形、その音の、音がその画面で見えるようになった、可視化できるようになった。音の波とか、そういう周波数とか、そういう音のそういう細かい周波数とかが見えるようになった。そういうのを勉強というか、そういう音楽をやってたのと同時に、普通にというか、ちょっとバンドで音楽も演奏してた。その時にお金もないから、そういう安いキーボードばっかりを買ってた。そうするうちに、同じキーボードだけど、そのおもちゃのキーボードとか安いキーボードだと、同じそのチューニングで押さえても微妙に音がずれて、それですごい変なうなり、音のうなりみたいな現象が起こるのを見つけた。だからそのコンピューターとかで作って、そういう音の細かいのを気にするようになったのと同時に、そういうバンドの演奏でそういう安いキーボードとかがそれぞれ違う特徴を持っているってことが、その両方の極端なところからなんか見つけることができた。
So when I was in teenagers, I started a computer. First, when I was in teenager, I started to compose music by the computer. So then gradually I started to be able to see the sound on I started to see the sound on the computer, very detailed frequency waves. So such detailed computer stuff I could see it on the screen. And then at the same time, I was playing in a band, and because I was poor, I couldn't buy expensive keyboards. I used to buy a lot of cheap ones, and then I also used toy keyboards. So by using all these cheap keyboards, I started to realize the same sound waves are quite different from each keyboard, and that's how I kind of discovered the different tuning and all that. So I started discovered each keyboard's got different tuning, different things, and by that I started to realize the sound delicately different from each keyboard, and that's how I kind of reached to the present music experience.
Yeah, again, he said so did you understand? Yeah. So you mean, if he was talking about, sort of computer software which analyzing the sound. You can see the frequency spectrum as a graphic images. Then, he was using kind of cheap actually keyboard because, he couldn't buy expensive keyboards. Because of lack of money. So then he realized, each cheap keyboard has a different frequency spectrums. And, if he plays together multiple keyboards, it's, he realized each actually, it kind of really causes frequency interference. There's actually what they call more resonance. So there's a kind of technical term.
More pattern of
Yeah.
モアレパターンっていうモアレレゾナンスっていうのは、音っていうのはその同じコードでぶつかり合うとそれがきれいに離れると違う音程になるんですけど、微妙にそのさっき言ったみたいに同じ音を押さえててもそのちょっとの違いっていうか微妙に音がずれるとそういう変なうなりが起きる。それのその共鳴してる現象なんですけども、それがずれるとそのちょっと変わったうなりが起きるっていうのをそのモアレパターンっていうふうに、モアレってなんか模様のパターンが重なるとちょっとなんかぼやけて見えたりとかする、そういうのを言うんですけ
So
ど。
more means when the same pattern, but if there is a very delicate difference, then the pattern start to make a kind of strange shape, and that's called more pattern. So the sound the same way. Each keyboard, even if you put the same tuning, because each maker is different, made, and when they put together, I mean, there's some space between before the resonant start, control resonant together. Before that happens, there's a certain strange sort of difference happens, and people can catch that difference, and that's called moire pattern. It's very hard to delegate, but it is a very delicate difference.
And how actually does it relate to the space itself? I think, depending on the space, it pretty sounds different. The performance itself sounds pretty different. 空間によってだからどのように変わってきますかと。多分演奏する場所が違えば結果が違うだろうと。
もちろん空間、まず最初にその空間ってやっぱその固有のっていうかそれぞれの共鳴の違いが部屋によってまた反響とかが違うんですけど、そのさっき言ったそのモアレの音のぶつかり合いがそのキーボードこういう円形状に置いてあると、そのぶつかる場所によってその干渉音、さっき言ったインターフェレンスサウンド、干渉音という現象が起きると、その聞いている場所によってその音の谷とか山とかそういう聞いている場所によってすごい音の違いが出てくる。だから例えば近くで聞いてるっても遠くの方が大きく聞こえたりとか、位置によって音が変わって聞こえるっていう、そういうのをやろうとしてるパフォーマンスで、場所によって場所によって音が聞こえるのと、それをそういう干渉音の現象みたいなものがこの微妙な音のズレで起こる。
So what
だから場所によって
he's
聞こえ
saying
方
that
が
it depends on the space, what kind of space, and also how you arrange the keyboard, like as you saw, that kind of round way, and so depend on where or depend on the space, the position of the keyboard, and the interference and the change of more patterns.
だから聞く場所によって
So the audience depend on where they sit or they move or stand or whatever. The different sound each audience can catch.
で部屋によってその音の反響とか人の動きによっても変わってくる。
Also depend on the size or what kind of room it is. Because each space has its own resonant and different sort of resonant or sound interference activity. So.
Yeah, actually, I've seen his performance. I've seen his performance. I actually organized his performance at the festival in Japan last year, and it's a kind of space, probably the half of this, probably the 2/3 of this room, and you can't go into the cube. This circle, but just by walking around the circle. And because there are so many sound sources and interfering each other, small details are really interesting. If you just move 1 meter, actually it sound really completely changes. And sometimes you hear kind of interesting phenomena. Sometimes you hear the far sound, and you don't hear the sound which is close to you. It's a kind of scientific reasons. However, it's kind of mysterious too. And it's also the space itself affects to the sound a lot. I don't know what kind of sound you use this time. What's like a space which you present ASUNA's performance tomorrow? Russian Hall. Almost like an auditorium. Yeah, so I'm really looking forward to it. Last time I saw that in sort of the concrete space, which is actually really reverberant. But this time probably different. So I'm really looking forward to see what will be the kind of different experience. And it's actually, things are subtle, but happening all the time and changing. That's why, in a sense, longer performance works better. So he said that he this time actually played 80 minutes. But he mentioned actually, he once did it in 60 minutes, and the flow was quite different. In a sense, that really changes kind of, mind of the performer and the audience as well. Because this is more like, he extends the composition approach. It is a composition actually. It's not really improvised at all. So there's a kind of framework, rigid framework. But within the framework, so much, in a sense, improvisation elements are happening, even though it's 100% composed. So that's kind of really interesting about this performance. Yeah. And Tetsuya Umeda, I think I'm not going to talk about his work much, but just let me quickly tell you about his work. He gets ideas for his work from environment and the circumstances surrounded in the performance or exhibition space. This means he go there and try to find what he can do. Of course, he has a basic idea, but he incorporate the kind of it's really site specific. So, and one performance I saw Tetsuya's is different from the performance which he present this time. And what interests me, he's more like an intuitive person. Of course, there's a sort of idea. He finds elements at the site and try to create. But some kind of mysterious things happens always in his performance, which is hard to explain. That's always kind of interests me. And he did one performance, which called internship at TPAM, the Performing Arts Meeting in Yokohama, where I work as a curator. And he used the venue itself as an instrument. What he did is, and that's why internship. Internship is a concert performance for which Umeda infiltrates as an intern. He acts as an intern into the technical staff of the venue who knows its mechanically and structure inside in order to dramatically play the venue's mechanism. Well, let's see the video, short video. No, sorry.
Fix. Down. Down. Okay.
So you see the large-scale art center, and he acted as an intern there with the technicians, and start asking what they can do as a theater. So so some kind of stage are movable, or they can change the sound position of sound system. Actually, if you go to this kind of high-tech modern theater, there are so many things the technicians can do. So he used that sort of possibilities as a compositional element. So he's kind of testing sound system. So that would be the part of the composition. And if you attend this kind of performance, you see what you usually don't see. Because technician knows how to do that, but if usually they don't use it for performance element, performative element. So that was also the interesting point. It's not like a conventional way of improvisation, but however, in a sense, he improvises what's there, and try to make a sort of structure for the performance. But anyway, so let's finish my talk, and if you have any kind of questions, I try to answer. But anyway, so Tetsuya's performance, it will be compared to different kind of performance. But the idea itself, he used sort of what's there as an improvisational material. So it's probably the same. And as I said, it's quite mysterious. So I'd like you to experience the real performance. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Aki.